So before we get started, something that we always love to do is, if you guys wouldn't mind, go ahead and hold up what you plan on working on tonight. So that way we can see where we're all starting off. I cheated. I went ahead and got started. So go ahead and hold up. If you're working on something with us, it doesn't have to be this coloring sheet. It can be anything that you plan on working on. And awesome, fantastic. So we look forward to seeing where we end up at the end of the coloring night. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Doug, and then he's going to kind of give us a little bit more instruction on what we're doing tonight. So Douglas Pierre Baulos is a proud UAB alum, where he earned his BFA in Art Studio before obtaining his MFA at the University of New Orleans. Doug's works are created as a meditative exercise exploring themes of loss, life, death, and memory. His mixed media works, installations, and book art often redeploy retired and found objects, imbuing new meaning while reflecting on the memory and history of its life. Doug has exhibited around the world, including exhibitions in Cambodia, China, United Kingdom, Spain, and Japan, as well as galleries and museums throughout the United States. His work can be found in collections of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, Birmingham Museum of Art, as well as our own collection here at AEIVA. He is a much beloved professor here at UAB, earning the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching at UAB in 2009, and is an active member of the Birmingham community, including working with Alabama Audubon. We're excited he teaches here at UAB, and even more excited to have him here tonight with us at Coloring Night. So thank you, Doug, and I'm going to turn it over to you if you will kind of take us through what we're going to be doing.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to see everyone, and I was able to navigate Zoom and see who was actually participating. And tonight, I thought we might do something kind of fun, but also going back to my roots. When I was a undergraduate student, I really got into the idea of mail art and communicating in a humble way, and being able to share things with friends and family and other artists all over the world. So I thought it'd be fun to design an envelope that you could put a bird on, literally, and send it off. And I downloaded and created some little calligraphy work things. And when I was thinking about you guys in coloring, when I first thought about coloring, a lot of times when I'm teaching people how to do calligraphy, the first thing we use, which I didn't bring tonight, but are Crayola markers, which look like Crayolas, but they're markers. And when you open them, like this is a felt tip, but the Crayola markers have a really amazing tip to be able to do calligraphy with. And even a highlighter, it's pretty easy to do a flourish with. And like, I don't care what you guys do, like the little envelope that I created already, which you guys, you have an indigo bunting template, and you have what's called a painted bunting template. And indigo buntings are primarily indigo and black, and like they're amazing, very vivid color blooms. And you guys, we have indigo buntings in Jefferson County, so it's not like a rare bird to see. You don't see it a lot, but painted buntings, as Sarah mentioned, we have those in the black belt, which is a fairly recent fly-in. But now, if you want to go see painted buntings in Hell County, you can contact us, and we'll tell you the spots where they have already been seen. And painted buntings are literally, they are that colorful. Like the yellow of the highlighter, I thought would be fun to have, because that is literally how yellow the painted bunting is. And, you know, like there's an old story about like people that guide bird hikes, because like, you know, I guide bird hikes for people all the time. And like a lot of times people will just show up and they're like, I don't really care what bird I see as long as I see a yellow bird. And I don't know what that means. But like for some reason, a lot of people are really obsessed with yellow birds. So like painting buntings or pine warblers, we have a lot of yellow birds to see in Alabama. And I just wanted to say that, like, the idea of ornate pictorial calligraphy is a really old idea. So like it's something that was incredibly kind of popular in the Victorian times. And so people would regularly do that as a way of embellishing letters. And like, let's say that you guys, here comes my unsaturated plug for Alabama Audubon. Let's just say that you guys wanted to be like, oh, Doug told me it's only $20 a year to become a member of Alabama Audubon. Like, you can make your bird envelope, then put your check for $20 in and just send it off to Alabama Audubon.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, I'm a proud board member. They're an amazing organization, and you know, they advocate for birds, but they advocate for a lot else, and that's primarily what a lot of our work in the Black Belt is about. So I'll talk more about that later, probably. But if you have questions, as Christina mentioned, they have a really great chat room, and we have a moderator that's going to keep me going about the questions. So she'll be happy to forward any questions. So she's waving at you right now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, are we ready to get started with the, I will go ahead and, whoops, I don't know what just happened to it. One second. Got it. Okay, there we go. Awesome. Okay, so Doug, I'm really excited to talk to you and kind of learn more. Full disclosure, I took your book arts class back a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's right.
And I've kind of been obsessed with your art ever since. I do have a few of my unfinished books over here that, not surprisingly, if you know me, I own a pet parrot, so they have a bird theme to them as well. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me. So let's get started. What influences you? What drew you to art in the first place?
Like I've always really liked drawing per se. And so I saw my sister is actually on the feed, and she recently sent me one of my report cards from high school. And I can't remember, but I had gotten like a C or a D even in one of my drawing classes. But like in my defense, a lot of times my mom would say like, you're not going to school today because she needed me to do something or whatever. But like I was, oh my God, I got a D. My students that are on the feed are like, haha. But I've always drawn and I've always loved it. And when I was young, I really liked playing the piano. But I've always liked art, and I've always liked the history of art. Like I'm definitely like I could have, when I was in undergraduate school, I didn't know if I was going to be a studio major or, I mean, I originally wanted to be a world literature major, but then I took an art class and it was all over. So, but I also really like art history a lot.
Awesome.
She's sharing a thing about Penelope, which is you know, who would, when she was waiting on him to come home, would weave and unweave time. And that is just something I've been thinking a lot about, like how we can suspend time in like a liminal space. Everybody can see that image, right? Yeah, okay, good.
So going into kind of what influences you, you use a lot of different mediums, but I know paper is a really big one, and also reusing found objects. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, like I'm very much interested in ecology in a large sense, and the idea of sustainability. And you know, like I noticed they just put out the prediction that we're not going to have access to the water to water by 2046. So like that's basically, you know, not that far away. And so that kids that are born today are not going to have the same access to water that we have. And so like things are changing very quickly in the scope of the idea of the human lifespan. And so, you know, I like to do things that I can bring into my work, but also that can bring up a conversation, so that when I'm lecturing or I'm talking in the museum or the gallery, I can talk about. And it's also a big thing for me because I used to buy art supplies, and like I rarely do that now. Like I have a dye garden, And most of the times I'm either making dyes or foraging for dyes. And like we were talking to Ramona early, because I was telling her, like in Hayden, like my friend has this huge property, and she keeps me informed about what's, she knows what I want. And so like she'll tell me when things are coming ready to use. And I'm really lucky because I have people all over Alabama that are helping me find things. And I have this whole program where I pass everything on. And so like because when I was in undergrad school and grad school, I was a pretty, not traditional, like I actually applied in 3 different media concentrations to grad school. So I applied to one place in video and one place in ceramics and the other places in drawing and painting. But yeah, sustainability, ecology, like a lot of my work is sourced from thrift stores, because, you know, if it leaves the thrift store, it's going into a landfill. So like I basically like going to the thrift store and trying to rescue things from the thrift stores.
So why don't you tell us about these that are particularly on the screen, and before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, sure. So like this was a series that I started about 4 or 5 years ago, and I, as a child and as a kid, I loved reading, and I've always loved the dictionary and the images in the dictionary, and I actually like used to love reading the dictionary, you know, not just using it as a reference tool. But I noticed about 6 or 7 years ago that I was starting to see like large amounts of printed dictionaries in the thrift store. And I was interested in it at the time because dictionary pages are very thin. And I knew that I could use that thinness to my own evil ends, because like that means I was able to do things with it, like sculpt it, glue it, weave it, and entwine it in different ways. And so like I started collecting them, and then just strangely enough, I was giving a paper at a conference in New Orleans, and another person had a panel that was about the death of the dictionary. And so I went, and they predicted that, you know, like, because I don't know if you guys know this, but like they predict that the dictionary and other reference books like that are not going to be ever printed again after 2025. And the other thing that they brought up, which was really concerning to me, is that like as technology changes, they have to introduce new words into the dictionary, and even online dictionaries, because that for some reason there's a cap that they want to maintain. And so like some of the words that they mentioned they were getting rid of, I was just horrified because they were super important words to me, like the word meadow or the word acorn, like words that I was like, what? You know, like a child going to the school library is going to look at a dictionary online, and they're not going to have a definition of what an acorn is. And it's just crazy. And so for whatever reason, whoever decides it has decided that primarily it's nature, words related to nature, that they're getting rid of to make, you know, you know, room for definitions of like what Twitter is or what bandwidth is and things like that. And so like, you know, a lot of people don't realize how quickly we're actually turning away from the natural world and stuff like that. So a lot of my work addresses like myriad layers of what's actually happening. And so that's why a lot of times I have to use, so this is a drawing that Bernard Hewins, a local artist, and I did together. And it's just an example of how to, like, you guys might use to flourish and fill your forms with if you don't feel like just filling in. You can, like, if you look closely, there's words, but a lot of times when you're practicing calligraphy, you practice making E's or making O's over and over again. So like that's a good, like especially E's are a really good thing to practice when you're flourishing. So that's so this is an illustration that Bo and I did for Alabama Audubon for a program that was at Moundville. And so this is a peregrine falcon, which if you know anything about the Indian population of Moundville, peregrine falcons and woodpeckers were very important to them, as well as moths. So we did this a big kind of thing, and we situated different Moundville symbols in it for I can't remember who was lecturing that night, Sarah, but it was for someone to lecture.
Shepherd Crab.
Couldn't go. Yeah, but yeah.
And so as we keep going through, you have some reoccurring themes like or images that you use. So birds and nature. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Sure. So like I use a lot of things from nature, but I also use a lot of representations that are about my personal identity or how, like being a queer artist, I've had to do things that have kind of like allowed me to have an identity. So I find like safe symbols and safe things that I think that I can reach an audience to have a conversation about safety. And this was actually a piece I did where when I went with two artists, Chris Lawson and Marilee Chalice, to Cambodia. We got a show, and then I was asked by the French Cultural Ministry to come back and live for a time in Cambodia and visit for like an entire summer. And I got to have a really nice show there. And I did a series of works where I went out into the world of Cambodia and like interviewed people and researched things. And I would make, I had a sketchbook that I had made, and I made small sketches, but then I went back to my studio, which was in Phnom Penh, and I made very large versions. So this is actually like, I think this is 42 by 60 inch. It's almost 5 feet tall. Collages and stuff like that. But, and that's my dog Mayo. If you've never met Mayo, I don't know I don't know why I put things in this order, but it's fun, right?
Hey Doug, I have a question from the chat. Christina, is now a good time?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So from Melanie Kendrick, she asks, you mentioned rescuing things from the thrift store. Did those inspire you to see if you could make something totally different from the original form or shape of what you were viewing?
Yeah, I mean, it always travels a good distance. And a lot of times, like the things I find in the thrift store, sometimes they become a wholly different thing. So like these wreaths that are on the thing, those are dictionary pages. All those are just dictionary pages that I've used a Japanese process that's called shifu, and I basically create a plant-based sizing that I coat the thing with and make and weave them until they become like string or fiber yarn. And a lot of times the things I find in thrift stores are like old linen clothing or shirts, and I'll put it in my beater, which is, you can see it right over there. That's my beater right there. So like, hey, I never had a beater, and that thing cost so much money, and I was so glad that the printmaking guy here was like, do you want anything? And I was like, we got a grant or whatever, so it was great. But like, that's primarily like how I make all my paper is from like upcycled linen clothes from the thrift store. A lot of people will make it out of blue jeans, but like I'm a super snob about my paper, and so like I want the best of the best. And in Alabama, the 3 best fibers I can sustainably gather are the hosta plant, the iris plant, and the cattail plant. But from thrift stores, I want linen, linen, linen. It makes the most beautiful paper ever. And like, if you've ever read Charles Dickens, a lot of times he'll refer, like in his stories, to rag pickers in London at that time. And rag pickers are picking rags to take to paper makers to make into paper, because at that time, the book had exploded and they needed to make so much paper that rag pickers could actually make a lot of money finding old linen and cotton scraps.
So in reusing things, I feel like that kind of goes into maybe why you went into teaching. So can you tell us why you went into teaching?
No.
You're definitely a favorite professor.
I never wanted to be a teacher. Oh my gosh. I think John Fields was on the call, and he was my student a long time ago, but like he also went to the same grad school that I went to. And when I first went to grad school, there were like 12 new students, and everybody went around the table and said like what they wanted, why they were in grad school. And I was like, I came here because you're paying me to be here, and I want to be an artist, and I have no interest in teaching and blah, blah, blah. So everybody introduced themselves, and then at the end they said, the only first-year student that's actually teaching is Doug Baulos from Birmingham, Alabama. And the girl next to me, who was my friend, became my friend, Yvette from Lafayette, Louisiana, was like, he's the one that just said he doesn't even want to be a teacher. And they said, we based it on your GRE score. And I was like, oh my God, because I'm good at science and math, I have to teach now. And so I got into teaching, and I actually really liked it. And a lot of people don't know this, but I was not tenure track at UAB until very recently. And so I was teaching 8 classes a year, and I just decided if I was going to teach that many classes a year, I was going to be good at it because it made it much more fun for me and hopefully for the students too. So I actually really studied teaching and equity, especially, and diversity in the classroom, because we have a widely diverse student population from all over the world, and it's really fun.
Well, and you are also really committed to diversity on campus. And you are involved with our Safe Zone program and such. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why you're so involved, not just our campus and community, but in the community in general, which kind of leads into your involvement with Alabama Audubon?
Yeah. So like Alabama Audubon, you know, like I lead a queer birding group that's for BIPOC and queer people, and it's all about finding a safe structure for everyone to be able to not only enjoy birding and advocate for birds, but also have like to push their intellectual and emotional boundaries, and in a safe community space. And UAB has this amazing safe space community, and I went through 3 years of training, and I see students from all over campus, and it's really great, and it's a great way for me to find out about what they're interested in and their readiness to find new opportunities. And sometimes it's really difficult because students, you know, encounter really frustrating things. And like for me, when I was a younger queer person, I did not care about pronouns. Like it was something I didn't even think about. But names for anybody are important. And like I think the pronoun thing is especially important now because we have so many younger adults that it is crucial to them. And so, you know, the idea of being able to say they as a pronoun instead of he or she, at first I will tell you guys very transparently, it was difficult for me. And like, it seemed like I kept on making mistakes to the people that were, you know, noticeably probably wanted to be called they. And but you just have to keep trying. And even in birds, like there's a coalition, Sarah, I don't know if you knew about this, but there's a new coalition that's called Bird Names for Birds, because people are really upset that a lot of birds have horrible names attached to them by like kind of evil or bad people. And so like I was just talking to a friend of mine, Sarah, I was talking to Molly. And so we brought Molly Adams, who's the Feminist Bird Club president, and she's amazing. And I was talking to her the other day, and we were talking about the bird names for birds. And when I was living in Seattle for a while, there was a bird that I saw out there that we don't have here that's called a Townsend warbler. And it's beautiful, and it's named after a really famous naturalist named Townsend. But like, he was kind of a jerk. And like, he literally was one of the first people that traveled across America. And he, like, if you think of Audubon's Birds of America, out of those, you know, 120 birds or whatever, Townsend is the one that's responsible for about 33 of them. So he's kind of a famous naturalist. But he also like dug up Native American graves to collect skulls. Like, he did all this crazy stuff. And so like, I was telling Molly, I was like, every time I would see the Townsend warbler, I would start thinking about him. And I was like, gosh, I'm looking at this beautiful bird. I don't want to think about him digging up Indian skulls. You know, it's like a poltergeist thing happening or whatever. And so, and it's the same with the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Like, I really hope they let Selma decide what the new name is going to be. But most of all, I hope they change the name, you know, and names are important and pronouns are important. So I think I just went way off track, but you
No,
got
it's
me.
great because
You
I
got
think
me
also
going. You know?
words and names go into symbols as well. And your work is very highly like iconographically, oh, I can't talk now.
Yeah. I think like though,
Icons.
because like I do
Symbols.
this thing that's called reckoning, and so like all the time I do these exercises in my studio where I try to ask myself super complicated questions about myself and about my relation to the world. And what I do is I have these structures that let me come to like symbols, textures, colors, methodologies that I think are uniquely my own. And yes, the thing I have to do as a queer person is I have to kind of say, what are things that I've developed that are to keep me safe? So like they're parts of my, you know, like my identity that are maybe not even true to me, but I do them because I'm afraid that people are going to say, oh, you're queer or whatever, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so like, I try to use both of those and find a way for them to become part of the conversation. I really do enjoy birds and anatomy and mortality and symbols of shelters. Most of my things, I like fragment things and then put them together so that they become new visions. And you know, it's all oriented towards creating these objects that exist in the world in positive ways. So like, I definitely live my life oriented towards, you know, being what I say is a fragile exultation, because I'm thrilled to be alive. I have a great time. I love, the other thing I always talk about is that like I'm the one, I'm sure there's many people, but I love Alabama. Like when I go lecture in other states and they, for some reason, there's something about me, they're like, I just don't really see you living in Alabama. I was like, you don't know anything about Alabama. Like, I love Alabama. And I go on to tell them why I love Alabama. I make a lot of friends. I make a lot of work about my friends in my community in Alabama to kind of spread the word about Alabama. And there are amazing people in Alabama. And I'm lucky to be able to get to collaborate with them and have them in my community.
Absolutely. And we're lucky to have you in Alabama for sure.
Wow.
So you've had a couple of installations at AEIVA, which will come up to a question or a image of that in just a second. But the hand, that's another symbol that I see coming up in your work. Does that hold a special meaning, or is it just a vessel for other meanings?
I think it's a vessel for autobiography in a weird way, because like a handshake is so personal, but also like a lot of things I enjoy. Like I've traveled in Mexico really well a lot, and so El Mano Poderosa, that's like a really powerful symbol in Mexico. And I've always loved hands. Initially, when I was doing figure drawing, which I mean, I don't know how it's going to work in COVID, but I'm teaching figure drawing this fall, and I love figure drawing. And I always loved drawing hands. So, and some of my favorite artists, they're known for like really being amazing at drawing hands, like Ingres or like Da Vinci and other people. So I've always loved hands, something about them.
So going back
I think you're
to
frozen, Christina.
Uh-oh. Are y'all hearing me?
I hear you.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep, we're good.
So going back to kind of what influences you, I'll read this quote and why specifically were you drawn to this one? So a book is more than a verbal structure or series of verbal structures. It is the dialogue it establishes with its reader and the intonation it imposes upon his voice and the changing and durable images it leaves in his memory. A book is not an isolated being, it is a relationship and axis of innumerable relationships. I feel like this was a really good place for this one to pop up in our talk, since we were talking about the importance of words and symbols. And I had never seen this quote and I love it. Can you tell us like where you came about this and how that plays into your work?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. So I will frankly admit I'm a it's awful how much I read. So I feel guilty because I read a lot, but I also think that's an important part of my studio practice, because a lot of times people think artists are just these people in these white rooms, but like I think listening to music and reading is an important part of my studio practice. But there's something about what he's talking about here, about the idea of ever changing, innumerable relationships, shifting, re-becoming different relationships. And that leads into my current work of the last 4 years, which is about creating these liminal spaces, which I think of as kind of almost a Southern Gothic thing. So like the book, The Ballad of Stein Cafe, or like even Harper Lee and other people, like they create these kind of like strange liminal landscapes that I've always really responded to, being, like I'm not originally from the South, but I've been here since I was basically 18, so over 40 years. And books, I've just always loved the process. Like other people like movies, but going into a dark space and then for 2 hours and kind of falling asleep and then waking up, it's just not the same for me. I love movies, but I love being in books. And I love that idea, like I was talking about Penelope at her loom. I love the idea because like when I'm reading, I'll go back and reread stuff. And if I feel like it, I'll go peek into the future in a book and sometimes and read a little bit and then go back to where I was. So like I do that. But I also think books are the things that I think about a lot, and poetry too. Like it really runs through my mind a lot when I'm like doing walking meditation or working in the studio and working. Like I'll think of things about books. And early on, I really wanted to learn about bookbinding, and there was no one in Alabama that I knew of that did bookbinding. I mean, there was the program at Tuscaloosa, but it's really hard to get access to that program if you're not in that program. So in the 80s, when I was in school, there was no opportunity. So I just literally, went to New York and bothered a librarian at the Morgan Pier Point. And she was really sweet to me and hooked me up. And I just started studying book art, and I was so infatuated with it, the history of it, and the processes of the binding and paper making and stuff like that. So I got really into it.
So I can attest to how addicting that is, because I took your class and not really knowing what I was going to be getting into, just trying to learn more about art, and I became obsessed with bookbinding as well. I've got a bunch of unfinished projects sitting around.
And I noticed some of my book students are on the feed, so I know a band that will not say anything on chat or out loud, but yeah.
But
yeah, I will say that's the one class, like I kind of knew, because when I came to UAB, like when I came back to UAB, we didn't have book arts or illustration or hybrid materials or anything like that, and like I knew if I came up with a really good illustration class, it would be popular. But I have been really surprised about how popular book arts has been. But maybe it's the enthusiasm of the teacher, because I am book arts. I am a book arts and bird nerd. Oh my God. I don't know which one's worse, but I'm a nerd about it.
I think people that really get into it sometimes too have been into textile arts as well, because I remember I picked up on some of the stitching for the binding really well, because I understood it from knitting.
Is that me that's frozen, or is that y'all?
I think you're frozen on my screen.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Yeah, Doug, it seems your bandwidth seems a little bit low.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. You have me back.
Are you fine though?
So while we're sitting here, book arts is not what people normally think of. Can you define what book arts is? Because there were some subtleties that I didn't realize until I took your class.
Yeah, like the big differentiation I make is between like letterpress printing, book conservation, and then actual book art. So like technically, like I'm not really a book artist. I'm an artist that used the book form. but like I do teach binding all over the place and historical binding at that. But I'm technically like an artist that uses the book form. So like, some people silo and make distinctions, but I like all of it.
And so this one would be kind of it would fall into book arts though, because it's not made on a press. It's a unique piece, right?
Yes.
So the bird, we've circled around birds and such. Why specifically birds? So we talked about hands as a vessel. Do birds have a particular representation, and why are you so drawn to them?
I've always been a bird watcher, and actually, the director of Alabama Audubon is a guy named Ansel, and like I just got a bunch of news clippings from when I wrote the weekly bird column at our small Illinois newspaper, and I wrote a column every week about bird watching. And I was like in junior high, and I like took pictures of them and sent them to Ansel, because like I remember being like going on my first bird watching hike. I think when I was like in the fourth or fifth grade, like really early on. So I've always loved them. There's something about how they rise into the air and come to the earth. But I've always really loved watching birds. And like, if people bird watch for widely divergent reasons. Like I'm not like a typical naturalist that's just about naming and identification. Like I really use, when I'm on a bird watching excursion, I think of it as a studio practice. So I'm trying to get ideas for my artwork. Stuff like that. So.
And I apologize.
And I especially, yeah, it's okay. But over the last couple of years, a lot of my work has revolved around some core issues of like ecology in birds, like the idea of re-nesting, or like my upcoming show in Fairhope is about shorebirds and water birds. So I'm doing a thing about like the equity of like, why do we call some birds like the least tern? Like what's least about it? And is that like a thing that I can apply towards, like the way I feel about some structures in our government right now, or whatever. So, but yeah.
And I wanted the weird sound you all saw, speaking of birds. This is Nellie. She apparently wanted to be part of this. So she's my parrot. But so going back to Doug though, I apologize for that. So the human form though, I know you said you like figure drawing. It also kind of comes up, and I'm going to start flipping through these because I know we're starting to go a little.
Yeah. Go fast, run.
But can you talk about more things that influence you and this kind of cycle of life almost, and celebration of life, but still having these kind of, I wouldn't call them necessarily morbid, but I guess morbid type iconography in some cases.
I just say mortality. Like as I get older, I just realize there's a lot of people that are not aware of their own mortality, and I think it's something that's a useful. Obviously, like in Buddhism, that's one of the main tenets of your meditation. But like, I think it's more than that, because like I'm interested in like what strikes me visible when I'm out in the world or in nature. And I just really feel like if you're not willing to see more than just what you're actually seeing, then you won't really see anything. So I try to find ways to push the visual things that I find beautiful or interesting, and push them till they become something else, where they're reconstructed and they have a new vision.
And this one in particular, since this is the one we chose for the
kind of.
I apologize. You were frozen, and I didn't look at your picture specifically. Go ahead.
But no, but like like as far as like birds and fragments go, like this is the white raven, which is like a biblical. The white dove is a biblical sense of hope. But I've always found birds very hopeful, and I'm interested in thinking about like what hope and grace is. I think the interesting thing about hope is that it's about resilience, and a lot of my work is about finding things that sometimes don't seem to be resilient, but I try to find ways so that people can find resilience for themselves through them, and how to inhabit resilience, so that you become stronger and can overcome trauma and other things like that.
And so is the raven the bird that kind of appears the most, or does it depend on which project?
In my next show, I think there's probably like, well, I'm building a huge piece right now about a kingfisher, but like typically I like a lot of birds. My favorite bird is the peregrine falcon, but I like a lot of birds. It's funny to find people, because a lot of times in bird watching, we'll say like, what was your core bird? What was the bird that got you into bird watching? But 3 years later, what is your favorite bird? Or 20 years later, I'm like, I really do love peregrine falcons. They're amazing, and we have an amazing one that lives downtown on one of the bank buildings. It's fun to watch. He needs to stop terrorizing all the chimney swifts, but he's fun to watch.
I didn't realize that that's what that one was. I feel like I've seen it.
Yeah, you probably haven't. And there's one on the Alice Stevens Center. I don't know if you guys knew that, but on the third floor of the humanities, you can watch the one that roosts on the Alice Stevens Center all the time too.
I'm going to keep an eye out now for that.
Yeah, peregrine falcon.
So I'm trying to get slowly but kind of quickly to the installation that was at AEIVA. As we do that, you guys will notice that these are very kind of what look like complicated installations. Doug, can you tell us about how long it took you to do something like this? And then when we get to the AEIVA one.
That installation was hilarious, because that installation was actually kind of based on a picture I had of someone that was very important to me that was standing behind an empty chair that was their husband. And I built that installation, as I do a lot of things that are kind of not really portraits, but based on people. And so I built this installation about her, and she was the first person that ever put my hands into an indigo vat. But anyway, it was funny because it took me almost 2.5 days to make that one piece, which is about 23 feet long. And at the end, I finished it like around noon the day it opened in the museum. And then they said, hey, we have a film crew coming. And I was like exhausted. And the film crew came up and like they asked me a question, and I burst into tears. Because like I literally had tears. And they're like, what's wrong? And I was like, I've just been thinking about my friend that died for 2.5 days. And like, it's just like, like the lights came on. And that's like, this is another portrait of an Alabama artist named John Woolley that was in the Alabama Reckner show at the Wiregrass Museum. And that piece is about 24 feet or something. It's really a large piece.
And then installations, I know they never go quite as you hope. I remember this is the one that's at AEIVA. This one took about over the course of 2 days? It took several hours each day, I think. But
I don't remember. But like I change them every time I put them up, and I always have extra parts, because like sometimes I'll drop a porcelain thing and everybody in the museum's like, ah, and I'm like, don't worry, I make extras. But also like I think it's important that like they never appear to be the same way over and over again, because like my feelings about people change. Why would the installation stay the same if I'm reinstalling it? Like it's one thing. Like, like the Huntsville Museum has a piece of mine up right now in their current show. And it's one thing for them to have it and own it as a museum and show it the same way over and over again. And that piece is also not a portrait, so it's different. But like, to me, I like changing them, and I like installing them and thinking about the people as I'm installing them. So like, this is a photo of a portrait of Marilee Chalice, who used to own Bottle Tree. And then it's also a portrait of an Alabama artist that lives in San Francisco in Germany sometimes, named Uku Tari. So yeah, that was, I think that was a recent faculty show, like 2 years ago maybe, or something. Last year, I don't remember.
This one here, this one was in, it was the one that was before CCAC, so I think it was 2015, 16. So
yeah, someone bought Marilee's portrait. So, but like, I'm going to show Uku in my next show at the Gadsden Museum of Art. So that'll be fun.
Awesome.
Christina, we're getting
yes.
close to end of time. Do you want to open it up to audience questions?
Yes, yeah, and I'm going to, there's a couple of slides left, so as we do that, I'm just going to kind of flip through some of them. Yeah, do we have any questions? And you can just go ahead and unmute if you would like. And so Doug, for your, as we're kind of nearing the end, for the book arts, that is a different type of, you know, do those have kind of installation with them, or, you know, do you show those in shows and such? You know, as for, probably not as frequently as your installations, but you know, do those get shown? Oh no, we may have lost him.
Christina, I think if you stop screen sharing, that'll help when he comes back on. It might free up some bandwidth.
Okay. And that's the
Sarah,
last slide.
not to put you on the spot, what would you like to talk more about Alabama Audubon while we wait for Doug to come back?
Oh yeah, always happy to talk about birds. Well, I didn't realize that how much of his work, this is more about Doug and his bird art, but I didn't realize how much of his work was ravens, and that's actually my personal favorite. So before I even got this role at Alabama Audubon, as I was saying, I'm also an artist in my free time, and one of my favorite things to paint was ravens. And so that was sort of my draw. Like I've had a passion for the environment and for conservation, and it wasn't like I loved birds more than any other animal per se. I didn't consider myself a bird watcher, you know, but I had a background in communications and marketing, and I heard about the position, and I was like, oh, I like birds. So I love how birds can bring people together, and you know, it's something that, especially during COVID-19 times, like I cannot tell you how many people have reached out to me personally and to our organization that like never watched birds before, but you know, in quarantine time and that sort of thing, more and more people are watching birds because they're in our backyards and they're entertaining. And a lot of people don't know that, you know, we have over 400 species that come through this state, you know, and there's all kinds of places you can go on field trips and check them out.
Also, people don't seem to realize how much of a personality birds have.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Even in the wild, I remember I was on a run, and these two birds were in a fight in the middle of the road over something. I just stopped and watched, and I was like, oh yes, I understand what's going on here. Birds are just so much fun to watch. And Rachel, I think I saw a question pop up.
Yeah, so someone's asking, Eve's asking, are any of these installations on view at the UAB Art Gallery, which is AEIVA, across Monell Stevens?
Currently not. So we have, our exhibitions rotate throughout the year, and unfortunately we have not been open due to the pandemic during the summer, but we will have a version. We do have an online exhibition up. Now that I'm on the spot, how do you save? Can you save Superman? And I see John's still here, so he might be able to chime in with the correct title of that online exhibition. So it is viewable online at the moment, and we are currently installing our next exhibition, which is called A la Carte. Can You Save Superman? Yes, thank you, John. That's the name of it. And you can access it through our website. And then a la carte is an exhibition that's about our various complicated relationships with food. And it will be at least visible in some sort of virtual format, virtual tours. And, this is always kind of an evolving situation. We hope at some point, that would be accessible in some form or fashion in the future for everyone. But no, so Doug's work, he's shown twice at AEIVA, and hi, there he is. He is shown in our CCAC and so 3 times, sorry. Because you were in the CCAC show, correct, as well? And then 2 faculty exhibitions, and then probably another time that I am forgetting.
I have a big show coming up at the Gaston Museum of Art next month. It'll be a huge show. And then I have a big show in September at the Eastern Shore Arts Center in Fairhope. And I have 2 shows in Japan right now. But I have a good website. You can check it out. Instagram.
Yeah. And I want to make sure, were there any other questions before we kind of conclude?
And I'll definitely be teaching classes through Alabama Audubon. So if you're interested.
Yeah, and Doug sometimes does workshops with us over at AEIVA and Art Play as well. So be sure to sign up for our mailing list, and we'll be sending out information about that.
Oh wait, we have a final question.
Yes.
What bird tattoo do you have on your left arm, Doug?
I have lots of bird tattoos. I don't remember my left arm. This is a pair of scissors that I liked a lot. Is that what you're talking about? And this is just a bird that my friend Victor drew. So it kind of looks like a swift, but it's not a swift. It's an idealized bird. But I do have a big peregrine falcon on my leg.
Awesome. Yeah, you've got a lot of really cool tattoos.
I have tattoos, yeah.
So as we finish up, I did not get very far, unfortunately, in my my coloring and calligraphy flourishes, but feel free to go ahead and pull it up. We will take a screenshot of everyone's what you've been working on, and oh, Stacy, that's awesome. Yay, hold them up. Excellent.
So cool. That looks great.
Yeah, and if you guys did the calligraphy flourishes, I see a couple of you have actually already decided to cut it out and fold it. But know that you can turn this into an envelope. Yep, like Doug has there. You can send in a donation to Alabama Audubon, but also you can join memberships with AEIVA and Alice Stevens Center. So that's also another way to donate. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to Alabama Audubon for partnering with us tonight. This was so much fun. Oh, and as we sign off, I'll have to put the bird up on my shoulder, if she'll go up on my shoulder. And so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doug, so much for doing this tonight. We really enjoyed having you. And
thank you, everybody, for coming. And I mean, I don't know why I went to my studio if the Wi-Fi wasn't going to work. I thought it was supposed to be better here. Sorry.
And thanks for inviting us, you guys. We had a blast.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And be sure to come back for our next 2 coloring nights in August with Stacy, who is here, and I think Elizabeth was on earlier as well. So we'll see you guys again in August.